Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Sunday the 19th of March 2023, and this is your latest instalment of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, hosted by myself, Craig Gray. This is the Independent Rangers podcast made for fans, by fans, and all content is free. You can check out our forum over at www.gersnet.co.uk, where we have a lot of fan interaction where you can get your opinion across. And we certainly like to do that on our weekly podcast here as well. Joined here tonight by, first of all, Mr. John McCallum. John, how you doing, mate?
I'm well, thanks, Craig. I'm well. Yes, can't complain. Mother's Day. Spent the day being nice to my mother. I'm nice to my mother every day, but I was especially nice to her today. She's a blue nose as well, so she's had a good weekend.
Well, that's a good one, and you've kind of stole my thunder there a wee bit, because we do also want to wish all the Rangers moths out there a very happy Mother's Day. We've heard of the Rangers Day trend, so I don't know, maybe we can have a Rangers moth one. It'll be a wee bit better for us anyway. But also joining John tonight, Mr. Patrick Caskey. Patrick, how are you doing tonight, mate?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me. Sadly, wasn't able to be with my mum today. My parents live overseas, but did give her a good call. But she sadly is not a Blue Nose, more of a Morton fan, which is quite weird.
Well, we've all got our flaws, don't we? But at least it's Morton, not another team from in and around the Glasgow area. But no, now that that's done, just need to get also our sponsorship said as well. Our podcast is brought to you by Forest Precision Engineering. They are a subcontract Glasgow-based engineering company who have been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for many years, and we're absolutely delighted that they're backing our podcast. You can get them over at forestprecisioneng.com. And you can also visit the Forest Precision Executive Lounge, a stunning new hospitality area within the historic main stand. And for more information on how to book this unique and intimate space, you can email the club via hospitality@rangers.co.uk. So obviously here to discuss yesterday's 4-2 victory over Motherwell. Actually, on a wee run against Motherwell now that's going back 21 years. That was the last time that Motherwell beaten Rangers in an actual league game. I'm not going to count what happened 8 years ago in the 2015 playoffs. Technically, that wasn't a league game anyway, but it was that game that James McFadden scored in 2002 that still remains the last time that Motherwell beat Rangers. John, the Motherwell fans probably had a wee feeling that they might end that hoodoo after 3 minutes when they went a goal up. What was your thoughts on that in the game overall, mate?
Yeah, I was actually at that the last time Motherwell beat us. And I think that was probably the last time I was actually at Fir Park, which is quite a thought. Oh, no, I must have been there since then. But I was at that game and we were actually well beaten that day. Yesterday, a very different game. Like you say, that the early goal, you did think, oh. But I've seen us go behind this season and I always felt confident we can come back. Well, perhaps not in the early part of the season, but certainly since Beale has come in. Anytime we've gone behind, you felt we could come back. If you're going to concede a goal, concede in the first 3 minutes. And I think that gives you most of the game then, conceding the first 3 minutes, not the last 3 minutes. I'm still far from convinced the goal was onside. Aside from whatever interpretation of the offside rule that frustrates me. And I moaned about this. I moaned about this a few weeks ago. And I'm going to moan about it again. If you're a defender, then you are conscious of the forward that's near you, right? And Van Veen, the guy that scored it, is offside when the ball's played through to the boy out wide. Now, I get the whole he's not interfering with play, right? But he is interfering with play because the defender who's marked him is leaving him in an offside position. So he is interfering with play. But I actually think the boy who got the ball was offside. I was looking at those lines that were drawn and I'm thinking, why could they not get a slightly better camera angle at Fir Park? Anyway, that moan aside, it certainly was, it was a poor goal to lose. I think they had decided as soon as they saw Yilmaz on the team sheet that eyeballs over to that side might work well for them, and it certainly worked well for them at the start. It was a well worked goal. What I think we were sleeping. We didn't defend it particularly well. It was a well worked goal. It's the time to lose it though. And to be fair, we did react. For all it was frustrating. We lost 2 very bad goals. We did react correctly, but no, I didn't enjoy the start of the game. I did smile a little bit that the Motherwell ultras that whatever the young team they've got had decided to come in just as Rangers scored. They were doing some kind of protest themselves, and they stayed out for their own goal and then came back in when Rangers scored. That made me smile a little bit. But I still felt whenever that first goal went in that there's still plenty of time for us to come back into this game, and that proved to be the case.
No, absolutely. Patrick, John obviously covered a couple of decent points here in terms of the first goal, maybe the confusion about offsides, and I know we will touch on a couple of the decisions in the game later on. What were your overall takes coming away from that one?
No, I immediately thought I was actually, I don't have Sky, so having to flick through quote unquote illegal streams, and then caught the goal flicking between them, and I was convinced it was offside, and then went to my other stream, which was 2 minutes ahead for whatever reason, and then the goal had stood. I think there's this sort of asymmetry between the camera angle we see on Sky is sort of the use of that is to get the best sort of for us to watch football, and those aren't the same angles that they're using in VAR, which also makes people come away from the game thinking they'll draw a line on the Sky footage, and that won't be the same thing they're showing wherever the box the guys do the sort of VAR stuff. But I thought it was offside immediately, but then I guess you have to trust because we don't get the proper sort of perspective for drawing the angles and stuff. And in any case, I think it was incredibly close, especially when we'll talk about the Sakala goal later. That was quite literally margins on which the blue line was maybe a millimetre thicker than the red line, and he was just onside, but to our profit. But I think it was a really poor first half. You could say it's a GVB problem, but also under Beale, we seem to be conceding first often. I mean, Hibs both times today, it happens a lot. Interestingly, I think us and Feyenoord as well today, who also came from a losing position, we've picked up the most points in Europe out in the top 10 leagues out of any team. I think it's 24 at this point, which is, I guess, a good stat. You'd rather not be in the position in the first place, but to show some sort of resolve is good, but to a point in which it's kind of frustrating. And even more so in the goal, especially the second one, which we'll talk about later, was sort of a calamity of our own errors. I think after that we were quite poor. I think we'll probably talk about Tav, and his free kick was great, and talk the sort of role in which Liam Kelly plays, because it's obviously a good free kick, but I don't think he does fantastic. But certainly the second half was better, and we'll touch on that later. But I think we started poorly for whatever reason. But it was quite funny though that just as the Motherwell fans came in, we scored. That it seemed a lot of clubs are having protests at this point. I'm not privy to why the Motherwell reason was, but I did find it interesting, and quite the message is clear with our own protest, with the sort of the cutouts of Wilson and Robertson shown before pre-game by a sort of sizable amount of the away fans.
Yeah, I think the Motherwell fans were protesting about some sort of police brutality at Fir Park, and I just thought the phrase Motherwell fans and police brutality going hand in hand was quite funny. But anyway, John, obviously it's a slow start again, maybe a wee bit off topic, but we've obviously mentioned there it's becoming a continuous theme under Beale now. I think he's 13 or 14 league games in now. You're probably talking about more than 50% of the games we've been a goal behind. We're obviously coming back in them and gaining points one way or another because we've not lost a game under Beale in the league yet. We've spoke about these 90-minute performances. We're not getting them at Ibrox. We've had them at, Easter Road and Tynecastle, but I don't want to say, eventually your luck will run out, because I mean, like you said, you're conceding after 3 minutes. That is the time to concede if you are going to do it. We come into the game, we're more than worthy winners at the end of it, but I just have a bad feeling, again, once we come up against better opposition, I say better opposition, I mean Celtic, that once they take the lead, I know we've shown that we can come back against them, certainly in the New Year game, but at the end of the day, we didn't win that. So, for me, that is a concern going forward with these slow starts. It's all well and good doing it against Motherwell and even Hibs a couple of times. We were there at as a club just now, but I just have a bad feeling that moving forward, we're going to need to scrub that out, because thinking back to the season we won the league again, I think we only conceded 4 goals or something like that at Ibrox the whole season. So it definitely needs to get clamped out.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you entirely that you do that level of defending against Celtic, they'll punish you every time, and you won't get the same level of chances at the other end. There's a big gulf. I heard the guys talking about it on the pod earlier, a few weeks ago there's a big gulf between Rangers, Celtic and the rest this season, arguably the biggest gulf there's been. And you do notice that, it's a Motherwell team in form, but, they're still not great. I'd love to tell you I knew what was causing this, because I really don't. You can only put it down to poor concentration. That they are simply not on it from the first minute. We were joking a couple of months ago now that Rangers were coming out at half time and in the second half, and they were starting the second half so well and playing so well in the second half. You think, well, whatever he's saying to them at half time, can he now just say it at the start of the match? We've done it now against Hibs and we've done it against Hearts, where you've had a 90-minute performance where we've played very well, where the concentration levels have been there. Why we can't do that against Motherwell, I don't know. Now, Motherwell didn't play a particularly offensive style of football. They were there. They were, even when they were behind, they were still sitting very deep, getting every man behind the ball bar one. Unlike the Hearts and the Hibs performances. So they didn't leave the same space. But you do look at it and you think, okay, no Raskin. Raskin wasn't playing. Since he's come in, I think he's just added something to the midfield. I don't think you can say anybody else obvious was missing. But I think Lundstrom, for whatever reason, his form this season hasn't been great. He doesn't have the dynamism. He doesn't have the drive that he showed for the second half of last season. That's missing just now. I was actually surprised that they played him and Jack. I thought they might play a more attacking midfielder and just let Jack sit. I thought that would probably be enough against Motherwell. But I don't think you can really just say it's one person. It's the entire team are not focused fully for the full 90 minutes. And that is eventually, I think, that's going to catch up. We either solve it or it's going to catch us out. There's going to be a game where it's going to catch us out. We're creating chances. We should have scored more than we did. If we'd come away from Fir Park yesterday with, literally 6 or 7, it wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have been ridiculous. We are creating chances. And again, that's maybe a different worry that maybe we're still a bit profligate up front. We're not taking every chance we create. But, the only thing you can point at is attitude. The only thing that for me, and that's the slight concern here, is that, our attitude is not right for the full 90 minutes. We go to sleep. We're not starting games, and we're not starting every game as well as we can. And that is a slight concern. And you do wonder if there's just maybe an element of maybe complacency with some players. They think, well, we're better, we'll come back into this. And maybe they didn't feel that at Easter Road, they didn't feel that at Tynecastle, which are generally harder places to go and play football. And it's a mentality thing. And it's a mentality thing we need to fix. That's something that needs to get sorted because, a big percentage of professional football is in the head, is mentality. It's something we need. If we want to win a league, frankly, we want to win a cup, we're going to have to get that sorted out. That needs fixed.
Yeah, you're spot on with that, Jordan. One thing, Patrick, that has maybe a bit more of a concern when Bale's done his interview. I've just watched the highlights on Sportsy because I've tried to watch it from sort of different sort of viewpoints of commentators and whatnot. Michael Beale's done his interview with the BBC afterwards, and the first thing he says is, pretty, poor the way we conceded 2 goals, but kind of laughing about it a wee bit. And I'm not trying to be hard on him or, sound overly negative, but it is becoming, that's John's doing the start of the Careless Whisper music video there. It is a concern, and I don't know, maybe it is mentality. Maybe the players at the start of games just aren't taking, opposition seriously enough or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it needs clamped out. He touched on Lundstrom there, John, who's obviously not been great this season. I was quite surprised by the level of his performance yesterday because when he plays alongside Ryan Jack, that is when you see the best of Lundstrom. And I think the second goal, it does seem like a bit of a comedy of errors from our point of view. And I know Lundstrom has been getting a lot of slack for it, saying it was an needless corner that he conceded. To be fair, I think McGregor doesn't cover himself in glory an awful lot better than Lundstrom there. Lundstrom's actually done the right thing and headed the ball back to the goalkeeper, where like the goalkeeper should just come and catch it. That's why you head the ball back. It's not why you pass it back with your feet. And then, just the goal's a complete and utter calamity. And probably the worst part about that goal was the fact that Motherwell played one step beyond. And a wee message to the PA guy at Motherwell, that's our goal song. So you're no nicking that, all right? One step beyond is the Rangers goal song, and Motherwell only taking ownership over that. But Patrick, what was your thoughts on that second goal and I suppose Lundstrom overall yesterday?
Yeah, I think that goal is perhaps like the perfect litmus test to see who you dislike the most in the squad, and that will be the one who you attribute the most blame to. I think as John touched on it, we've seen Lundstrom. He's been at the club for 18 months, and he gave us a really, really, really solid 3-month cameo. It's almost symptomatic of what people said at Sheffield United. He was there for 4 years and he had that one awesome year. Everyone in fantasy had him in the EPL. We'd obviously thought it's the EPL. It's like night and day with the Scottish Premiership. We should come in here and that shouldn't be a problem. But it seems to be, and it's probably one that I would at least suggest we cut our losses with in the summer and just take anything on the basis that he's had that, he's made memories here and he'll be loved for some bits, but I think it's just becoming almost a chore. I saw someone describe that, and I think that's pretty fair. Nothing he does is absolutely terrible, but it's the constant inability to put his head up and drive, which is something we've seen, especially since Raskin has come in, and it's sort of chalk and cheese. When he's here, we don't appreciate him as much. But I think with that second goal, Lundstrom obviously heads it, which is a good idea. He doesn't head it quite to McGregor, but also McGregor could be closer to him to make the header a bit easier. Then Tab gets his head on it, which is fine in itself, but he just balloons it up, drops, and then I have no idea what Cholak's doing. It might be a lack of communication. He doesn't know what to do. He's also sort of, if he kicks it, he's going to have to kick it into his own goal, or he's going to sort of risk that. Similar to, I think it was Goldson against Hibs when he puts it into the back of the net. But it was, I guess, a lack of decision or indecision there, which I guess is symptomatic of both the first and the second goal. And a lot of the goals we've conceded has been our inability to put the foot down. And some will be reactionary and say we need some sort of classic old school defender who'll just get his head in there, and then that would obviously help in those situations. But I think that is as much as individual decision making, confidence, but probably communication. Obviously, we aren't able to hear what the sort of players are talking to each other, but you would expect in a team in which all roles are defined and people are talking regularly, these sort of goals don't happen. Obviously, that's just sort of some like hypothesis, but I think that could be true. But I would probably give Lundstrom the biggest stick in that second goal. That's also because he's probably, of the 5 players involved in the chain, the one I'm sort of least happy with at the moment.
Just on that, it's interesting you blame Lundstrom, because I think Lundstrom, I actually didn't feel Lundstrom did anything wrong with his header. I think he headed it, he didn't head it back in between the goal, but he did have to head it. He couldn't just leave it. So for me, there was no shout. For me, the goalkeeper has to take control of that. There can be no shout. And for the actual corner that came in, again, I think McGregor, there's no shout. Cholak rather is clearly waiting for somebody to say something. He's looking straight at McGregor. McGregor's either shouting away or he's shouting it's his. And for me, he's doing one of those two things. Now, if he's shouted away, Cholak hasn't cleared it, then the blame lies with him. But if he said nothing, if he's just waited, that's where the indecision comes from. And anything that's in that area, the goalkeeper has to take control. And whether that control is him actually going and taking the ball, or whether that control is him telling somebody else to get rid of the ball, that's the goalkeeper's domain. And we've spoken about this before. It's a season too far for Alan McGregor. It's a shame, and he's still capable of moments of brilliance, but it's a season too far. And thankfully it didn't cost us yesterday, but it could have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit weird for Alan McGregor not to shout, because he seems to be doing that quite a lot. It's definitely in his makeup. I would say on to the equaliser, I'm actually just going to turn this into more of a sort of discussion point. I think we were going to discuss the protest first, but I'll just sort of mix it up a wee bit because we're on the game and may as well just keep talking about the actual game before that. VAR, those 3 wonderful letters that we love to hate in Scottish football and everywhere, I suppose, but more so up here. John, I know you've obviously had a wee sort of mini moan about it earlier. Look, for me, it's something that had to be brought in. I know for a lot of people, it's maybe causing more issues, more indecisions. One thing that I would say with VAR is, of all the VAR decisions that have went, I would say 99% of them are actually correct. I think one of the issues with VAR is perhaps things that are missed, and I think that's fair. I think people have got sort of every right to sort of question that, but I think if you look at pretty much every VAR decision, you could count in one hand anyway the ones that have been made that probably shouldn't have counted, and even if you think they shouldn't have counted, it's probably a 50-50 debate because, as we know, a lot of these decisions are down to interpretation. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on how it's been overall, not just for Scottish football, but for Rangers and stuff like that in particular. I mean, put it this way, there only seems to be one team in this league, apart from Derek McInnes, that's moaning about VAR week in, week out, and not getting decisions and whatnot. So, for me, it's actually been more of a positive for Rangers, like I actually thought it would be. I thought that we got a lot of offside calls made against us before VAR coming in that, are now sort of being rectified. Yesterday's one could be a prime example of that. Not the equaliser, sorry, Fashion's goal to put his 2-1 up, because on the one hand, yeah, he does look offside, but on another, he looks on. I think one thing that's really weird about the way that the offsides work is how long it's taking to actually reach a decision. It doesn't help when whoever's in the VAR room doesn't have access to a ruler, because that line is like the wobbliest thing. It's wobbly than a bowl of jelly. So stuff like that's really annoying. Handballs, penalty decisions, red cards, fouls, there will always be debate around that. I get that. But offsides, there can't be any debate. And we use in Scotland the Hawkeye system. Now, I don't know if the view that you get on a Sky camera at home is the same as what they have in the VAR room, and Sky have maybe just put a wee bit of fancy graphics in it to show what they think's offside. Hawkeye should be working, but I think what we need to get towards now for the offsides are the sort of automated offsides that they've got in the Premier League and the Champions League, where the referee knows straight away. It's almost like goal line technology, whether the ball's over the line or not, whether a player's offside or not. That should be taking seconds, and then the game goes on. Obviously, other decisions down to interpretation, but John, what was your thoughts on, both the goals yesterday, the ones that were called into question, and how VAR's been as a whole since coming into Scottish football anyway?
You said an interesting thing at the start there, Craig, where you said it had to be brought in Scotland. Did it have to be brought in? For me, VAR is something for people who don't go to football matches, for people who watch football on television. And in England and in Spain and in Germany, the television companies put so much money into football that they get to call the shots. And they've wanted VAR, they've wanted that, the added drama that brings, the extra talking points, they've wanted that because of that. But in Scotland, they don't put anything like enough money into football. And for me, I would have chased them. I'd have said, no, you're not getting it. You want to put VAR into football here? That's fine. Double the amount of money you're putting into the game. Become the partner you should be. Because what this does just now is it inconveniences everybody who is actually at the match, who doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know if it's been a goal, who can't celebrate. And it spoils something of the spontaneity of football, which is part of its beauty. So, it may be at some point UEFA would have said, you've got to have it. But I'm against VAR for that reason. I'll caveat that by agreeing with you that 99% of the time it's right. 99% of the time it gets it right. And then there's that 1% of the time, or whatever that small percentage is, where you look at it and you think, what the hell are they looking at? What is it they're seeing that I'm not seeing? Now, it's clearly not perfect. And I think that's what we're expecting because it's this technology, because they have time and replay and all that. You're thinking, well, it should be perfect. They shouldn't be getting anything wrong. In the past, referees and linesmen made mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes were then highlighted later. But as annoyed as you were by them, you accepted that they made a decision in a split second. They had one moment to make that decision. And sometimes you looked at it, you're like, how the hell did you make that decision? Why did you see it that way when clearly everybody else saw it a different way? but you accepted that, no, they didn't get a chance to see it again. They didn't see a slow motion replay. They didn't get this. Whereas now they do, and yet they still seem to make mistakes. And that I think again adds to the frustration. The 2 goals yesterday, as I said earlier, I thought the first goal was offside. I still think it was offside. The second goal, I thought he was offside. It was miles offside initially. And as Patrick said, you saw it again, you thought, hang on, actually, maybe he's onside. I think if both of them had been chalked off, I don't think too many folk would have complained. And as it was, both were given. It didn't affect the result, so I guess we're all just kind of shrugging our shoulders and saying, well. But I still think they were both slightly dubious decisions. I saw a clip, I didn't see any of the game, but I saw a clip of the sending off on the Hibs Celtic game, the second booking, and you just think, how is that a booking? How did that guy get booked for that? He basically got fouled. And you think, okay, well, is VAR not allowed to step in because it's a booking? Is there a rule that stops that? Or did VAR look at that and think that is a booking? These things are troubling. The time taken, I assume it will get quicker. I assume we'll get better at it. I assume the people who operate it, the people who make these adjudications will get better at it. You'll start to get quicker. The technology that you spoke about that's used in other leagues will probably become something that is available to all leagues at some point. So I suspect it will get better. I suspect it's something we'll just get used to. I suspect it's something that some people are used to already. But I don't like it. But then I'm old. And when they change things like that, it annoys people like me. Part of... This is sound daft, right? Like the Scottish Cup final in 1989, when Celtic beat us 1-0. And they scored a goal, right? And it was a throw into Rangers. Right? There was no debate, it was a throw into Rangers, right? But Roy Aitken picked up the ball and just threw it. And Celtic started playing. And for some reason, the referee just said, okay, play on. And they scored from it. And they literally walked down the field and scored from it. We were livid. And, I'm still livid about it. It still annoys me to this day. But it's I wouldn't want you to take that away from me. Because, sometimes injustice, sometimes a feeling of being cheated, that's kind of part of being a football fan as well. It all goes in with it. The good times and the bad. The things that went your way and the things that didn't go your way. We spoke, or we didn't speak, but there was earlier on in the week, the guys were talking about a kind of famous goal that you both might have seen it since. You won't remember it, I doubt you were born, when Rangers played Bruges in the first ever Champions League. And a Rangers player at the time, a guy called Scott Nisbet, scored one of the most unusual goals you've ever.
It was windy that night, put it that way.
The ball just took this. I don't think he was shooting. I don't know if he was crossing or what he was doing. He was the kind of player, I'm not sure he knew himself what he was doing. But it took a terrible, terrible spin in the air, and it came down and it bounced in the strangest direction and over the goalkeeper. And then one of these goals that you never forget. And again, it's a bit like that. The luck went our way. That ball went our way. Luck was going our way that season. Marseille had to cheat their way to the European Cup final that season because luck was going with us. So that's part of football, Craig. And I guess VAR is now part of football. It's not going to go away. They're not going to get rid of it. It's here to stay. I think it will improve. Technology will improve. People like me, we will just get used to it and we'll moan about it later. And you guys will, and the people who are coming up behind you will just see it as part of football, and a necessary evil, and we'll all adjust to it. Overall, you're right. It has probably given us more in our favour than against. It's probably given us the decisions that we weren't getting, particularly at away grounds, we're now getting because they were right. It's not infallible. I suppose that's probably a good thing. What would we have to talk about otherwise? What else would we moan about? It's not infallible. I guess it will be at some point in the future. AI will come in and fix it, and a computer will instantly tell us if he was offside or not. Something like that's going to happen. You can see it.
Aye, and don't worry, there'll still be certain conspiracies coming for the East End anyway. Even after AI comes in, they ask him what school he went to. Patrick, again, it's just. I actually think John's made a couple of interesting points here. The one that I kind of thought most of was the one about the TV companies and, it's something that's maybe more for the fans at home. And I do kind of get that, because when you're at grounds, especially, I mean, I was at Livy a few weeks ago for the 3-0 victory, and obviously the first penalty's been given with VAR. There's no tellies at Livingston, so you don't know what's going on. Obviously, Ibrox have got the screen, so you can see what decision they're thinking about. But at the end of the day, the decision's not going to be played back on the big screen at the stadium, which, from a fan's point of view, that is annoying, because you want to see what's going on. You want that to be part of your experience. At the same time, though, can you imagine a referee going up to a VAR monitor whilst the fans are allowed to see it back at Ibrox or Celtic Park? The referee will just probably be under even more pressure and, you know, under more shouts about certain things. So I can understand from their point of view why, you know, they might be against that. But look, I will stand by what I said, in the sense that it had to come in, and I would stand by that in the sense that we're seeing the decisions go for us now. There's been very little that's went against Rangers, and that's not because of some big, you know, conspiracy. It's because, you know, we're getting decisions now that we maybe wouldn't have gotten, you know, a few months ago, and there's no hiding places for the referees now. One thing that, you know, as well, that's kind of confusing me is maybe now there's a kind of lack of instinctiveness maybe from referees. They seem to let things go on and almost be too scared to give a decision, because they'll say, "Ah, well, it's fine. I'll get saved by the guys in the VAR room, and, you know, everything will be all right in the end." John mentioned the second game yesterday in terms of the red card. It's never a second booking. I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, that VAR looks at second bookings, which I just think is weird, because it's obviously you're sending someone off anyway, so it's a pivotal part of the game. The decisions they made yesterday, 2 penalties. The first one, the Hibs penalty, Starfelt's grabbing the guy's shirt for a good length of time. It's a clear penalty, and the referee doesn't see it at first. Now, the second penalty that Celtic got, I think, was a penalty. Soft, but laws of the game and whatnot, I think it was a penalty. But it was far less lenient than the first one. But then as soon as the challenge was made in Carter Vickers, straight away, Stephen McLean's pointed to the spot where he needs 10 minutes to decide that Carol Starfelt's had a tug on the guy's shirt for about 10 minutes. So I think the referees are certainly inconsistent when it comes to maybe the on-field decisions. I think maybe when it goes to VAR, they're slightly more consistent, but there's always going to be inconsistencies there. What's your take on the whole situation?
But I think the penalty we got against Hibs was probably the perfect example. Kent's category taken out. There's no excuse, and it's not called on the pitch, which makes no sense. Obviously, they have the backup to go to VAR and say if it is a pen, but equally they have the backup for them to sort of dispel it and say it's not a pen. I think what we see specifically is sort of the granular analysis of anything that happens in the box, and it's almost to the point where it's like a parody. I understand that if someone does a small sort of pull of the shirt or the tiny bit of contact, but it's almost to the point where we're ignoring the sort of natural game state, and we're isolating the single action, which is the foul, which makes sense from a very sort of scientific and technocratic view, which is like, is this sort of the definition of a foul? But I think it almost becomes to the point where we're isolating the rest of the game, and it's just like, what happens there? And I think from a pure refereeing, that's probably what they're advised to do, but I think it almost kills the game to an extent. We see these sort of penalties, which within the rules of the game, I guess should be given. But if you were to ask the vast majority of people watching the game, they would say, given the sort of paces they took outside of the box or whatever, it's kind of it's a bit harsh. So there's no nuance to it, which I guess allows people to be more binary, because that's what we want. We want a yes or no. We don't want the in-betweens, because that's what festers sort of conspiracies, complaints. But we've seen even with that, with the offsides today, there'll be people saying lines are drawn improperly or whatever. As for VAR, that was interesting. In Sweden, they're voting as to have it or not. And I think they need to get a 2/3 majority, and they didn't get it. So their clubs voted to not implement VAR, interestingly. And I was watching the Conference League last week, Slovan Bratislava playing Basel, with Vladimir Weiss was playing. He's in his mid-30s now, but he was playing. And there was an offside call that took 8 minutes to deduce. Not exactly sure how that's possible on the basis to draw lines for 8 minutes, but it happened. And hopefully, when we're at the point in which these sort of minute details, which anger people, are reduced to the point where it's like automated, it's like an automatism in 30 seconds, then we're fine. Because I think with VAR, there are people who are just fundamentally against the concept of added sort of sort of mechanisms in football, and that's fine, traditionalist stuff, and I applaud that. And barring a sort of 100% perfect implementation of VAR, which is basically seamless, they won't be on board. So I guess it's reducing these sort of minor cognitive lags. 8 minutes is a very large lag, but even some of the examples, I think the second yellow when we were playing Livy early on in Michael Beale, when we drew 1-1, one of Gio's last games, I think it took them 4 or 5 minutes to get that second yellow, and it's just killing the game clock. I think a funny example, it's funny in hindsight because we won and it was a good game, but Braga at home when we won 4 or 5-1, and there was the 3 roof offsides, and they were just taking ages to go on that basis, and it's almost killing the game. But again, we were having fun and we were winning, so I was happy. But if we were down 2-1 chasing the game, that would be an absolute murder. Similar to when Red Star at home and Kent gets the penalty. I was in the stadium. I had no idea what is being called for. I think there are ways to go, and it can be more signposted. But I agree. I don't think publicly broadcasting the VAR process on the pitch is probably the best idea in regards to the safety of refs. Not to say that something bad would happen in Scotland. I mean, I could see something kicking off in Old Firm, but I think it's a precedent set for the rest of the world. There are some places probably in Istanbul or in Athens where I wouldn't trust on the screen to be the best example. Or in Groningen in Holland today, there was a brawl at the game that had to stop the game. Some guy punches their left back and they have to finish it. So I think player and referee safety is important, and it's deteriorating. And I think we need to make sure VAR doesn't inhibit that. But again, there's 3 major stakeholders: players, refs, and fans. And I don't think the dynamic is good, and I don't think it'll ever be that good in football. And that's just how it is. But then that gives us something to complain about. And if anything, football fans secondly to their team winning is they do enjoy complaining.
Yeah, John, see, just on that, sorry, I wanted to ask you a question, right? Because you said you're against VAR completely. See if VAR was just introduced for, say, goal line technology and offsides, where the offsides were as clear as day, yes or no, it's offside, but you weren't allowed to have VAR for red cards or penalties or anything like that. Would you be in favour of it then?
No, I think you have VAR for everything, or you don't have it at all. I think that's part of the issue. I didn't know. I wasn't sure about the bookings thing. I think you just confirmed there that it's not used for second bookings. Which you think, well, what's the point of having it? Why have it? Have someone there doing it? Why would you not? It's something that changes a game, that affects a game. Surely that would be something that you would get it in for. So I think you either have it for everything or you don't have it. Part of my dislike of it, part of why I'm a curmudgeon about it, is because it's new to me, but also because it takes professional football another step away from the game that we can play. Now, the beauty of football was it was the same game. The game that you played in the park, the game you played at school, the game you played in the BB, the game you played at whatever level of football you played was identical to the game that you went to see Rangers play. And over time, that's changed. And this is just another step along that way. Again, this is just a personal thing. I get that, things change, time moves on. But it's another step away from that. So for me, the TVs thing and the fact that it's just, again, football moving another step away from the game that I grew up playing. I don't play much football these days, but the game I grew up playing, it's another step away from that. Just one very quick thing that came to me when Patrick was talking. Someone very close to me went to Murrayfield yesterday for the first time. I'd never been to a rugby match before, and was showing me today an earpiece that you could buy outside. And you bought this earpiece and you could hear the referee. Now, I don't know if you've ever watched rugby union on television or anything like that, but you can hear the referee speak. The referee will explain, can you check if that was a try? Can you check if the ball got put down before his leg went out of play? You get that type of stuff. And you can buy this and hear what the referee is saying through your earpiece in the ground. 67,000 people around you, and you can hear what the referee's saying. And I wonder if that's what's coming in football next, for in the stadium, so that folk know what's going on. Not necessarily listen to the referee, but whether as somebody explains what's going on with VAR, why has the game been stopped, what are we waiting for, what thing. I don't know if that's what's coming next. I don't know if that's suitable for football. Football's very different as a spectator sport's very different from rugby, so I don't know. But that technology exists just now in Scotland and is being used.
Yeah, just don't let James Bisgrove know about that, because he'll be trying to make money for the earpieces outside, and blazing it in Rangers.
You've got to buy them. They're not free. You've got to buy them.
I will. we'll definitely be pressing the SFA for that one in the future then if there's a pretty penny to be made. Moving on then, John, I'll start with you. Ironically speaking of James Bisgrove, I know technically he's not part of maybe the wider movement, but obviously we've seen more protests against the board yesterday's game. That's 2 weeks in a row. I asked the lads a question, last week, how does this end? And we all kind of came to different conclusions. I really don't know what's going to happen here, because I think on the one hand, you've got a group of fans, mostly the Union Bears. I mean, I would say pretty much all the Union Bears are involved in it, but there is a wider sort of group of fans that are very unhappy with the way that the club's been run and stuff like that. And do you know what? I've got a lot of gripes with the current board and, part of maybe the direction that they've taken the club in the last couple of years as well. But I've always felt that in terms of these sort of protests, they have very little effect in my experience. And I think one of the examples I used was the Sydney Super Cup fiasco, where, fans groups seem to think that because they went and sang a few songs that you shouldn't have sung at St Johnstone away and you threw tennis balls on the pitch, that Rangers stood up and went, oh, by the way, we can't do this, when really it was because, the big PR disaster that was causing, that was the reason that they pulled out of that. For me, look, people are entitled to their opinion. At the end of the day, if you pay your money, and it's a lot of money to go to football nowadays, especially away games, you're entitled to your opinion. And I wouldn't want to take that away from anyone. One thing that kind of is maybe getting to me a wee bit more now is Michael Beale's comment yesterday, where he said kind of the same, people are entitled to their opinion, he says, but it can have a negative impact on the team. Now, on the one hand, maybe we should stop the protests then, because it might affect the team's performances. But then again, you would need to say, well, these guys are professional football players. The protests aren't aimed at them specifically. So, you should be sort of grown up to sort of get on with it and do the job that you're paid to do. It is a bit of a mess, but John, I think no one wins out of this, whether it be fans of the club. We all want to be going together in the same direction, but just for one reason or another, it just doesn't seem that that's going to happen at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all supporters have got. If you want change at a football club, then all you can do is make a noise and either vote with your feet and don't go to the game, or go to the game and protest in whatever manner you want to protest. So I have no problem with people protesting. If they're unhappy, I have no problem with them protesting. They're not breaking any laws, they're not hurting anybody. They are expressing their annoyance. So I don't have a problem with doing that. That's what football fans do. I don't buy Beale's comment. I think if you play for Glasgow Rangers, you're a couple of bad passes away from having 40,000 people express some fairly strong views that you will certainly hear. So I don't personally buy that the players are, in any way put off by that. I don't think that affects the players, and not the protests as they stand just now. I don't think that affects the players. I don't know why Bill said that, because I don't buy it. So I'm all for fans being able to protest. I remember I'm reading a book just now, a book just out, and it's about it's Souness and Smith when they came in. The kind of first 5 years of their reign. And what's been fascinating for me is that was just, at my kind of core of me being a Rangers supporter, like mid-teens. And at that point, the season that they were appointed, Rangers finished 5th. And we just finished 5th. Dundee nearly pipped us to 5th place in the league. There were protests. People, A, there was about 20,000 people turning up for games. B, after the games, there was big crowds of folk standing in Edmiston Drive shouting abuse and letting the directors know they were deeply unhappy with the direction of the team, letting the players know, letting the management know. That's all supporters have got. It's all we can do. And I think you have to accept that that's a supporter's right. Do I agree just now that what they're complaining about is legitimate? I don't know if I do. I think I appreciate these particular complaints are directed at two people in particular, Robertson and Wilson. I think you have to say this board have turned Rangers around and put us in a far, far stronger position than we were before. And whatever your personal feelings about certain individuals on the board, I think as a whole, you have to say they've done a good job for that. Now, will they be able to close the fiscal gap between us and Celtic? I don't know. Will they be able to close the gap that's on the field between us and Celtic? Yes, I think they can. I think they can. Things will change. Nothing is inevitable in football, but things will change. You know, what's going on at Celtic just now will not continue. They will hit a blip. It's up to us whether we will actually deal with that and be able to capitalise on that. We had a bad window, or a bad-ish window in the summer. We had, two signings we brought in there in January were pretty good. So first impressions are a couple of decent signings. Guys who look like they belong in our first team. They're the right age, and they look like pretty good signings. So I get why some people are frustrated, but I also think you need to stop and say, what have we lost twice this season? Our manager left last season and we brought in a manager who I think most people thought was a very good signing, a very good manager to bring in Van Bronckhorst. He did exceptionally well last season. He got us to a European final, won us the Scottish Cup, and then for whatever reason things did not start the season particularly well, albeit he qualified us for the Champions League for the first time in a long, long time. But I think we all agreed that towards the end, it was clear that something was wrong. I don't know what was wrong, but something was wrong. The board eventually acted. Van Bronckhorst left, and they brought in Beale. And I think most people are quite happy with Beale being our manager. So, I think we have to take things in some perspective. I'm certainly not at a stage where I'm for shouting for anybody's head. I'm not at that stage yet, but I get why some people are. And I think you have to respect that right and just accept that it's going on. How does it end? If we keep winning, if the team keeps improving, it peters out. It peters out naturally. If the team stumble, if we had some difficult patches, then it will probably pick up some more momentum, become more vocal and potentially become a bigger thing. I think it will depend on what happens on the pitch, because ultimately what's happening on the pitch is what most Rangers fans care about. And the frustrations over signings and decisions being made at that level, we'll see what comes, I think, over the next 6 months. We're telling 6 months ahead, Craig. That's what I think. But everybody has a different view on these things, and I understand that's the beauty of football. And I think you have to respect that, and you have to let people have these views.
Yeah, I think that's a couple of interesting points you made there, John. I think one thing, that a lot's been held at this board, more so sort of towards the end of Gio's era, was the fact that, people are saying that the board's more reactive than proactive. And I understand that sort of criticism, but at the end of the day, it's football as well. So you kind of need to be reactive at the same time. And they have been very reactive. And in fact, I would say, that's probably been one of their biggest downfalls, is how reactive they've been. They are, if you look at managerial appointments, when things weren't going well for Warburton, he left or he gets sacked or whatever got happened, but he left anyway. When things were going bad for Pedro, he left. They backed Gerrard and, eventually kind of realised that they need to give someone time. And after they gave someone time and money and whatnot, it worked out. Gio came in after him, done well, certainly last season in Europe and winning the Cup. But as soon as things go wrong in the league, he's not getting that same time that Gerrard got, and being reactive again, he's out, and then they're getting Beale in. So I don't know. It's a weird one. I think that there is valid criticisms to be levelled at these people, but are the criticisms, that far that these people need to be removed from their positions? I don't know. I've mentioned before about Ross Wilson, and I think he's the one that most people are airing their grievances at. But again, the club haven't really came out. Nobody knows what Ross Wilson's sort of day-to-day job description and job function is. We all think we know what it is. We say, well, he's a sporting director. He must be in charge of signings. He must be in charge of negotiating deals and whatnot. But there's a lot more that goes into it than just one guy on a board. So I don't know. It's a weird one. I think one thing that Stuart Robertson said at the AGM, I think it was the last one, not the 2021 one was when someone questioned Ross Wilson, and he said, well, Ross Wilson came in 2019 and I've got a far better squad in 2019 than what we now than what we did in 2019. And at the end of the day, that is true. You know, you look at the squad this season compared to what it was in 2018, 2019, it's a lot better. But I get that. I think for me, maybe it's the fact that some of these people might be coming to the end of their shelf life. I think, kind of similar to the players, I've said that this squad of players, these players have had a certain job to do in the history of our football club. That was to get us back to the top and ultimately being normal and challenging for things again. They've done that. That doesn't mean that these are the players to continue going on that and making Rangers sort of normal again, if that makes sense. And maybe that's the same for some people on the board. Patrick, what's your overall thoughts on the protest, and how do you think it will end up finishing?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we'll get into sort of Mexican standoff, because I think the board have all the leverage. I mean, obviously, Rangers are in a unique position, much like Celtic and a lot of the similar sized clubs outside the top 5 league, in which the vast majority of our revenue relative to the EPL or the Bundesliga is in matchday revenue. So we are relatively sort of tied to our ability to bring fans in, to get them to buy a drink and a pie and then to buy the tickets. So we need that. I also think fundamentally we need to realise that especially Twitter is not the same thing as the Ibrox crowd. I think we often conflate the two and see that just because the sort of every post on Rangers has the sort of the headshot of the two with the red X doesn't mean that's actually the feelings for the vast majority of match-going fans. Not to say that there isn't a substantial loud minority of match-going fans, and don't want to speak for anyone besides myself, but I do think we need to sort of not link the two. And I agree. If Rangers go and win the cup and we have like a strong summer, you'll see some people who are in the camp on the basis of just sheer optimism, and it's exhausting to be angry at something you love for so long. Sort of revert to type. I think a good example is we've seen the UCU, the University Union. It's been striking against university in the UK for 3 years, and nothing's really happened. Do I see the UB and all the fans striking for 3 years? No, I don't think that's possible on the basis that this is something we love to do, and no one's forcing us to be a Rangers fan. So there's some natural proclivity to just go there and enjoy. I think relative, obviously, with Wilson and Robertson, there is plenty of sort of stuff to hit them with. And I think what we're risking is a lot of people are just making stuff up to the point in which to suit their narrative. I think when you mentioned Wilson's remit, I think it's relative to what you want it to be. Some people will just disregard the fact that, let's say, for example, the renovations of everything in-house since Gerrard got there was done under his watch, or at least towards the end of it. The women's team has got a lot better, the youth team has got a lot better, and people will be like, that doesn't matter. And they're just cherry picking that on the basis that they can basically streamline it to say, I don't think he's signed players well. Obviously, that's the most important bit relative to what we think, because we're all Rangers fans, but that's more specifically the men's senior team and us winning stuff. And sure, you can bias that as the most important bit of his job, because it probably is relative to your match-going fan, but to sort of disregard everything else he does is sort of superfluous at best, or disingenuous. Not to say he has not done well in the main facet of his job. I think it'd be quite hard to argue that he's had more hits than misses, and I think a lot of people have done some threads on that. One piece of criticism I find hilarious is that he didn't sign Dutch players when Gio was here, and that's apparently bad for him. I don't get that at all. But I do understand the vast majority of the kickback. As John said, I'm not here to argue with it or to discredit it, because it's valid. But I do see it perhaps as a bit reactionary. And as you said with the Australia thing last year, sure, the tennis balls and the singing sectarian chants made a difference, but it was more so just the vast majority of reaction as opposed to that specific one. I don't think cutting off our nose to spite our face is the way to go, on the basis that just because the board don't like it, we'll do it, because the vast majority of match-win fans probably don't want us to sort of self-hinder on the basis of trying to get two guys out of the club. And I think there was an interesting thread on the basis last night of, are we running a risk of getting rid of the board's men, who are Robertson and Wilson? They're put in there by the board. Are we running the risk of running away their investment? And albeit the sort of football clubs seem to be fertile grounds for investment right now, it's not a guarantee that we get someone with our best interests. I think it'd probably be an interesting competition whenever it comes, but I'd much rather have the board we have now than some sort of petrodollar funded club that has no soul.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, after everything that happened in 2012, we all remember the people saying, we want Rangers to be owned by the fans, we want this, we want that, and okay, we're not exactly sort of fan-owned, stereotypically, but most of the people that have got an investment and a shareholding in Rangers are Rangers fans. They are Rangers men. They do deep down want what's best for the club. They might not necessarily go about that in a way that some people agree with, but it is kind of what we all wanted after 2012. And, I know there was obviously talk of investment lately from America that's died down, but I think we need to think very carefully. What is it we want as like a future of a club? How is it that we want to be run? I don't think Rangers can be fan owned. I don't think a club of our size can be fan owned. I think it's impossible because fans can't sustain the level of investment required for a Rangers team to compete in the league in Europe, continuously. It just can't happen. So we need big investors from out with fans' own pocket. We've got that from actual Rangers fans. We're actually in a very unique position, possibly in world football in that aspect, that, think of how many well-off people own a club that are fans. I mean, I know the whole chat around Todd Boehly that he's a big Chelsea fan, but I don't think he maybe grew up going to Stamford Bridge and whatnot, but it's a good soundbite for the fans. So I don't know, it's a weird one. I think we can appreciate people have their opinion on things, and people are entitled to their opinion, but I think Patrick made a good point there about just getting facts right, and people kind of just making things up to maybe suit their own narrative. I don't really know how this one ends. I just think one thing for me, it's like, I just think a lot of people can't handle the fact that right now Celtic are better than Rangers on the pitch. It's hard for everyone to take, but it's kind of like the scattergun approach out as soon as Celtic are ahead of us after. And look, I know people will go on and say, we had them down after we won the league. Did we though? I mean, Celtic were always going to come back. You think of all the money that they've accumulated over the last 10 years or so at the expense of us not being in the league. Celtic could go and spend 30, 40, 50 million quid over the space of 2 years to invest in a good squad and a manager, which they've done. We could have signed another couple of players last year. Would it have made a difference to the league? Maybe it would have, maybe it wouldn't have. If we signed Cantwell and Raskin in the summer, would it have made a difference? Who knows? But now back at a point where I know it seems like Celtic are really far ahead of us, but I don't think it's as bad as what some people are making out. And hopefully the game at Hampden will show that, but that's a long way away. As is the next Rangers game, guys. Just as we finish up there, we're not in action for another 2 weeks. It's a dreaded international break. Scotland playing against Cyprus and Spain, where Ryan Jarrett's going to be involved. So hopefully he doesn't get injured, and hopefully the other lads that are away on international duty, I know Sakala and Barisic are away after. I don't know if his wife's given birth yet, Barisic, but we certainly wish him well with that one, and Glenn Carraway, Finland as well. So we'll certainly be wishing all the Rangers players that are away on international duty all the best. Hopefully they come back fit and firing, because after that we've got a few big games coming up, starting with that home tie against Dundee United. As well, guys, you can catch the pod tomorrow on all your podcast providers, like Google Podcast and Spotify. That'll be on tomorrow at some point. And if you are just catching the end of this on YouTube, you should be able to go and rewind it to the start as well, so you can listen to us drone on from the beginning as opposed to just from 10:30 at night. But all that's left to do for me tonight is to thank my guest. Patrick, thanks for coming on, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having.
No worries. And John as well, thanks for coming on, mate.
No problem, thank you.
No worries, guys. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll see you after the international break. Bye for now.